Now, how do, more feedback, how does a woman get her husband to understand that she's just trying to communicate with him? She's not, quote-unquote, nagging.
See, now I wrote Men Are From Mars 18 years ago and taught it for 10 years before that. And I'm telling you, I had all these wonderful techniques that make it work. But they weren't as easy as what I finally learned. You know, you do something over and over and over. You try 1,000 different ways with 10,000 different people. You come to simple techniques, and they work. And this is something that I've been doing now in my groups. You know, as I mentioned to you earlier, I have every month I do 40 people in a relationship weekend together in California. And in there, I try out all these techniques until they get easier and easier and easier. And the answer to that question you just asked is what she can say to her husband is she can say, honey, I just need to talk to you for 10 minutes about lots of my feelings about what's going on today in my life or this week. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to change any way, and you don't have to feel bad. And I don't want you to respond afterwards. Once I'm done, I'll tell you, thanks so much for listening. I feel better. It's raised my oxytocin levels. It's lowered my stress levels. Now I have more energy to go about my day. And there is no discussion afterwards. And then what happens is something miraculous, something new, something that couples never experience, which is she talks for 10 minutes, he looks at her, he doesn't try to fix anything, and he doesn't have to prepare through the whole conversation what his response is going to be. You know as well as I do, as a guy listening to a woman talk about problems, if we're just listening, then we're sitting there thinking in our heads, okay, now what am I going to do? What am I going to say?
Listening for the trigger words that you're going to respond to.
That's exactly it. And when a woman just says to men, you don't need to do that, really. This is a non-problem-solving conversation. I'm just talking about problems. That will raise her oxytocin levels much faster, much higher than if she spent 2 hours talking with another woman. Because it's a different type of conversation where you're only talking about problems with no intent to solve them.
Welcome back. You're listening to Empowered Living Life, the Truth, and Being Free. I'm your host, Steve Maraboli. For more information about A Better Today, our speeches, programs, seminars, please visit abettertoday.com or stevemaraboli.com. Also, for more information about this show, we have some great guests coming up, as well as over 80 hours of archive information available at empoweredlivingradio.com. If you're curious about the new Blog Talk radio show I have, information is available on there. Also, again, that's empoweredlivingradio.com. We're having an amazing show with Dr. John Gray. He's the internationally recognized expert in the fields of communication and relationships, and he's the author of 15 best-selling books, including Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He's here speaking with us about why Mars and Venus collide. That's his new book. It's about improving relationships by understanding how men and women cope differently with stress. His website is marsvenus.com. I want to get to some more feedback in this last segment. One person asked, I would love to hear what my wife thinks, what she has to say about our relationship, but when I ask her what's wrong, she says nothing, but believe me, it's not nothing.
You know, this is a common thing, which is guys will say, what's the matter, what's going on, and a woman says nothing. And he hears nothing as either a refusal to talk, or some guys actually think they take it literally and go, okay, and they go watch some TV. And often when a woman feels not safe, or that she's not loved, or that someone's really not interested, and you ask what's going on, they'll say nothing. And then your job at that point, which nobody taught you this job, is to pause for a little while and consider what might be bothering her. And then you say something like, you know, did you have a difficult time talking to so-and-so at your job today? I know that was a concern for you. Or is there a huge amount of stuff you still feel like you have to do and you're kind of overwhelmed about that party coming up? Now, see, the thing about those questions is I'm not just saying what's bothering you. I'm actually having some awareness in my own mind about what could be bothering her. And she might then say, no, but then it will come forward. She needs a little stimulation to sort of bring it forth. She doesn't really sometimes know where to start, or she doesn't feel safe enough, like you're interested enough. Quite often your history in this situation might be that when she brings up problems, things that she's bothering, it turns into an argument, or he ends up defending himself, or he ends up minimizing what she has to say, like, well, that's not a problem. You shouldn't worry about that. Well, what's the problem with that? So she doesn't really feel safe to bring it forward because she hasn't thought it out, thought it through. women often feel this need to talk about what's bothering them as a way to sort it out. So while they're sorting it out, maybe something starts out being very important, but by the time they've talked for 5 or 10 minutes, that first thing they talked about isn't so important at all. They need a little time to explore that. It's the same thing in the bedroom. Often they need more time to get in touch with their real strong, passionate feelings, whereas a guy often can be right there, ready to go, ready to do the thing. And so women have a different physiology, a different response to things. And men do too. I mean, we're just looking at the woman's in this case. And if she says nothing's the matter and you sense something is, it's good to start now doing some questioning.
Another question, this is very relevant to today. A woman in California asks, my husband, newlyweds, she puts in parentheses, is now at war, and we find ourselves in a long-distance relationship. Romance is not an option. Please help.
Oh, so that's really a challenging situation. So the key to this, in terms of, like, for example, the last 3 weeks, I've pretty much been gone on this new book tour for Why Mars and Venus Collide. And the times I have come back have been quite wonderful, as opposed to a long time ago I used to go on book tours and there'd be this alienation and there'd be problems. And the solution there for both of us during the time and when we come back together is I call her several times a day and just ask her what's going on in her life and stay in touch with what her feelings are. Now, what's interesting is just talking about what's going on will stimulate a little oxytocin, but if I understand her frustrations, her disappointments, her worries, those are more vulnerable and they're actually more feeling directly connected to her feelings. That will stimulate a hormone called oxytocin that will lower her stress and increase her attraction and her love and her connectedness to me. Often, women whose husbands are at war will come to me. I talk to the military all the time, and they're like, what do I say? What do I do? What do I ask him? And so forth. And it's always the women thinking they're supposed to get information from him, whereas the key to it is for her just to share information to him about her life and then communicate to him how good it feels for her to be able to talk with him and stay connected with him, because he does love her so much and he cares so much for her. And it's so good when you're out here all alone having somebody that you know loves you. And so you're giving him a sense of meaning and purpose for those calls and for the relationship that you're really appreciating. Not just this service being over there in war, but you're appreciating that he's talking to you and he's listening and he's interested in your life.
John, is this, in the state of our society now, where, like you said earlier, there's tons and tons of divorces, tons and tons of failed relationships.
And I'll add to that another statistic, which is new, is it's increased a huge amount in the last 6 years, how many single women there are. It used to be there were a lot more married people or people living together, and now there's more women alone than ever before in the history of statistics.
Is this book a cure for that, or is it something that can just help relationships that maybe weren't broken but could use some understanding?
It's both those things. If you've got a little tiny fire, it helps you put out a little fire. If you've got a forest fire, it helps you to fight fire with fire and put out that fire. I mean, literally, we are all going through this crisis, which we're calling a stressful life. And yet it's a wonderful thing to have many choices, and opportunities is a great thing, but it can also then bring about lots and lots of stress. So we just have to say, okay, let's learn how to cope more effectively with that stress, and let's use our relationships as a way to cope with stress, and that's what I've seen you can use. It's like the fire extinguisher, but for many people, coming into their relationship is like another source of disaster, or another fire that happens. So if you've got a good relationship, this is going to enrich it and allow you to experience something beyond what you thought was possible, which is what's happened for me.
Thank you so much. We were talking with Dr. John Gray. He's the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and his new book, Why Mars and Venus Collide. Check out his new book at marsvenus.com. Dr. John Gray, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Empowered Living, Life, the Truth, Being Free. We'll see you next time.